amidst reports of the Labour cabinet at war, it's now emerged that Angela Rayner is specifically pushing for a major increase in spending on social housing before the conclusion of the government's spending review, which is highlighting tensions.
Now, while the Deputy Prime Minister has long supported more social housing as a personal mission, what's going on with affordable housing in this country, and what do the in-depth figures reveal? Well, joining us now to discuss this is senior researcher at the Prosperity Institute, Guy Dampier. We should say that the Prosperity Institute is owned by the Legarton Group, and the group is also one of the lead investors in the holding company of GB News. But Guy, thanks very much for joining us. Angela Rayner in this social housing row, is she right to call for more spending on it?
Good morning. I don't think she is. We already have more social housing than most other countries in the OECD. And although social housing can be valuable to help people, ever since the 1970s, we've shifted from supporting families and supporting those in work to supporting those in need. And far too often that's meant that people are having more children than they need just to boost their place in social housing. We've got too many people who were born overseas who are accessing social housing. And we've got people who are refugees and aren't even British citizens who are accessing social housing. And that's all being paid for by the British taxpayer.
I think many people will assume that if you are over here on a short-term visa or seeking asylum, most people don't have recourse to public funds. They're not allowed to claim benefits during that time. And yet this report reveals that many local authorities have found a way around that. And many people who don't have access to public funds nevertheless have access to social housing. What can be done about this, Guy?
Absolutely. So there's something called no recourse to public funds. And the idea is that people who shouldn't have access, like certain working immigrants or refugees, shouldn't be able to access public funding. But there are ways around it. The big one generally is to do with homelessness and destitution, where you can have a material change of conditions and the authority can basically put you up in order to deal with that. Or if your children are at risk of homelessness, that also they have a statutory duty. But it's also the case that a lot of social housing or socially subsidised housing is not actually necessarily owned by the authorities. It's often run through RSLs or through housing associations. And these have their own rules. So you can conceivably get money from the council or from the government to spend and then spend it on housing, which you then give to people who are foreign nationals. But because it hasn't come directly from the government, it's not counted as a public fund.
Now, Angela Rayner might struggle to get her argument for more social housing over the line, Guy, because as she's making this intervention, an online publication called the Pimlico Journal has produced a very extensive report on the cost of social housing. I think we can show a graphic that GB News has got from the Pimlico Journal showing the cost of social housing in London there, 8.8 billion in rent to London social housing tenants. And Guy, talk us through some of the costs involved here.
So we are talking very, very big costs. So what this really interesting article has done is they have worked out what the implied rent subsidy is. So that means if you have a house which you could put on the market at £2,000 a month, but because it's social housing, it's £1,000 a month, then the implied rent subsidy is £1,000. And what they've worked out is that the amount of money going to people in social housing in London is enormous. So to give you an example, if you are in Kensington and Chelsea, your average rent subsidy or implied rent subsidy for a year is £23,000. So if you live in social housing, it's the equivalent of having an extra £23,000 in Kensington and Chelsea, which obviously a lot of people would quite like to have an extra £23,000. But even in Manchester, it's over £7,000 if you're in social housing. And in somewhere like Southwark, which is less nice than in London, the implied value of all these rent subsidies over a year is still £661 million, which is compared to an annual budget of Southwark Council of £874 million. So these are staggering numbers of essentially subsidies, effective subsidies that the taxpayer is providing to a select few in social housing.
Guy, I think a lot of people will think that social housing has an important role to play, especially somewhere like London, where housing costs are so high and people on low-wage jobs otherwise can't afford to live anywhere near they work. And of course, that's a problem. But what these figures reveal is that there are actually around 250,000 social homes in London being rented by people who are not working. That's not what social housing was originally for, is it?
Absolutely not. Up until the 1970s, social housing had very strict conditions on who could get it. So what we're actually talking about here is the taxpayers subsidising people without jobs to live in our nicest city, when a great many people who are working class or middle class even, cannot afford to live in our own capital city. So we obviously should be changing this.
And Guy, there's a point here about immigration as well, isn't there? Because in these statistics that this publication in Pimlico Journal have brought forward, they found that 48% of social housing in London has gone to people who have been born out of the United Kingdom. Yes,
so it's an enormous number of people. I think many people would correctly say that if you're born overseas, even if you do become a British citizen, you shouldn't be be able to access this kind of thing. And you can see even that people who aren't British citizens are able to access it. So with some of these groups, it becomes absolutely enormous. So, for example, 73.9% of households headed up by a Somali in London are in social housing. That's obviously far too much.
Well, Guy Dampier, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid.
Anna Mikolova. Anna, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This infighting going on in the Labour cabinet, do they have the spending opportunities to really be scrapping at each other for extra cash?
Well, I think this is more, it is expected ahead of the spending review because Angela Rayner's department is one of the unprotected departments. And as far as reports are concerned, she is really looking like cuts to her budget might be on the table. And that is a big threat to her main project of delivery, which is building this 1.5 million homes target, which is, very, very difficult to reach in the best of times, never mind when your budget's getting squeezed. So you can look at this a little bit like the inevitable wrangling before a spending review where cabinet ministers throw their weight around and really try and say to the Treasury, look, don't you dare come for us. But you could also very much look at it as the inevitable precursor to a leadership pitch, which combined with Angela Rayner's absolutely sensational memo about tax rises proposals to Rachel Reeves can be seen in the round. Whoever leaked it, the fact that she even put it in writing and tread on Rachel Reeves's toes in such an outright way shows that she is on the march.
Do you think, though, sometimes, Anna, that there is the sense that politicians can't really win? If they toe the line and do exactly what the Prime Minister says, they're accused of being sheep. But if they put their own opinions and have some ideas and have some debate and don't agree on everything, then suddenly it's infighting.
Well, look, I think you're right that, there is a certain level of debate that's required. That is what the cabinet table is for, those cabinet meetings. But I think when you're getting headlines like today and front pages saying that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is at war with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, then that's a bit of a problem for the government.